Okay, welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the new legislation regarding testing for lead in drinking water in childcare. My name is Caroline Olstad, and I'm the Lead in Drinking Water Specialist at the Minnesota Department of Health, otherwise known as MDH. Our other presenters today are Liz Robertson, a research scientist at MDH, and Anna Schleet, the Lead in Drinking Water Coordinator at MDH. Just a few notes about the webinar today. The webinar is being recorded and will be made publicly available along with the presentation slides. Except for the presenters, all microphones will be muted. If you have questions, please enter them in the chat and we'll address those at the end of the presentation. If your chat box isn't already open, you can do so by clicking the chat button on your toolbar at the top of the screen. And to practice using the chat function, I would like everyone to please type in the chat box the name of the city from where you are listening. And as you'll see, your answers will show up for everyone to see in the chat, but the chat box will not show up on the meeting recording. Looks like we have some from Wilmer, Apple Valley, Edgerton. Oh, we have a Wisconsin person. Hello, St. Paul, Egan. Nice, Sandy. It's always fun to see where across the state or even across the state border people are logging in from. Renville, Detroit Lakes. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And if technical issues occur, you can try leaving the webinar and then rejoining it. But if that doesn't solve the issue and you need some additional assistance, you can also contact the meeting organizers at the phone number listed on the slide, and we'll also put that in the chat. We'll be using a few polls today to make this session more interactive and as a way to get your feedback. So we'll start with one of our practice polls. And that poll should just pop up right on your screen, and you can click the answer and press submit. Our practice poll question is, what is your favorite football team? Now that it's football season is upon us, you can make your selection and push submit. And only the meeting organizers can see the names and responses to poll questions. Attendees will just see the general result of the poll. So once you make your choice, you'll kind of be able to see how everyone else is answering. Looks like we have some Green Bay Packers fans. Maybe that's that River Falls, Wisconsin person who's joining us today. And that poll will stay live in the chat for a little bit if you're still working on your responses. We'll have a few more of those a little bit later in the webinar. We'll also be sending a feedback survey to everyone who attended the webinar today, which will include some of the same poll questions in case you don't want to answer during the webinar or in case you need more time to consider your answers. If you would like to submit your responses to the survey as we go along, we'll also include that survey link in the chat. So our agenda for the webinar, we'll start with talking about some of the health effects of lead, and then the Minnesota Department of Health resources for testing for lead in drinking water at childcare. Then Liz will share some information about another MDH program called Choose Safe Places. Anna will share information about the lead testing state statute. We'll have a consultation portion of the webinar to start getting some feedback on reporting and accessing lead results. And then lastly, we'll have some question and answer time at the end of the session. So why is testing for lead in drinking water important? As you can see on this slide, ingesting lead can have many negative effects on our health. That could be memory loss, lower IQ, behavioral problems, fatigue, etc. And many individuals with elevated blood lead levels have no apparent signs or symptoms right away. So without testing, people might not realize that they are being exposed to lead and that their health is being impacted. A few things to remember about lead. Children are most at risk, and that's because they are still growing and their brains are still developing, and no level of lead is safe to consume. Lead impacts learning and behavior, which is why it's so important to try to catch any lead that children might be being exposed to as early as possible. So at MDH, we have a program which assists schools and child cares in investigating and reducing sources of lead in drinking water by utilizing a federal grant, the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation grant, otherwise known as the WIN grant. And that program provides free drinking water test kits for lead and training for how to collect water samples for public schools, charter schools, all licensed child care providers, and Head Start programs. Facilities don't have to test through the Department of Health, but a benefit is that we are able to provide the testing free of cost through the free of cost to the facility through this WIN grant. There's also flexibility for participants to collect their own water samples, or if you need some assistance with that, we can also connect you with a contractor who can collect the water samples. The program provides lab analysis of the water samples once they've been collected, and then assistance with reviewing the lab results and understanding the different remediation options if they're necessary. That could be things like water filters, cleaning faucet aerators, and flushing the water. So I've included links to our website for more information and to get to the application if you would like to use the WIN program to test the water at your facility. That second link there is the direct link to the online application form. So if you're interested in testing, the first step is to fill out that form. It doesn't take long, it's just a few questions about your location. Once you fill out the application, we'll find a time to meet for a training session, kind of like an orientation session to go over everything with you. And then you would develop a plan for where in your building you want to test the water. Then we would send you a sample kit in the mail, which is essentially a box full of empty water bottles. Once you receive that, you can collect the water samples and send them back to us at the Public Health Lab in St. Paul. We include a shipping label, so you wouldn't have to pay for shipping either. And then on average, it takes about 3 to 4 weeks to get the results back. And once we get those, we'll send those to you via email in both a Excel spreadsheet format and also a PDF format. And if we do find any elevated levels of lead anywhere in the building, we would talk through some of the different remediation approaches you could take or action steps that can be taken to reduce that level of lead. And then lastly, you can share the results with the public and the families that you work with. And with that, I'll hand things over to Liz to talk about one of our other MDH programs.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Robertson. I'm an environmental health assessor at the Minnesota Department of Health, and I also coordinate a program known as True Safe Places Minnesota, which is a multi-agency effort aimed at protecting kids from harmful environmental exposures in the childcare setting. So a little bit of background on that. What I do at the health department is evaluate sites and places around the state that are impacted by air, water, or soil contamination, and then help determine if there might be any exposures that affect human health. And as you can see from this infographic, unfortunately, while I'm doing this work, it seems like there's always a child care center nearby, which gets roped into our investigation. Because, as you may recall, when you first applied for your license, there's no requirement making sure child care businesses open up in safe locations. And by safe, I mean, number one, that harmful chemicals aren't currently present on the property or in the building you use for your childcare business, and that harmful chemicals haven't been used, dumped, or stored at this property in the past. Number two, the same goes for any neighboring businesses. And number three, that your drinking water meets federal and state criteria that has been tested for contaminants that are known to harm children, especially lead, as you've heard. But also for those of you getting your drinking water from a private well, we also recommend you go beyond the required testing for bacteria and nitrates and also test for manganese and arsenic. So what the health department offers through Choose Safe Places is participation in our site screening program. It's totally voluntary and pretty easy for you because we do the dirty work of evaluating your childcare location for the potential hazards I just mentioned. All you have to do to kick off the process is go to our Choose Safe Places website, click on the site screening program button, and fill out the short property survey there. We'll get your contact info and ask a few things about the property. One of the main questions for us asks what you know about current or former uses of the property. So places like dry cleaners, auto repair shops, industrial use, gas stations, proximity to nail salons are big red flags for us. And once we have some of this basic info from you, we have mapping tools that we pop your address into to compare your location to what we know about hazardous sites in the area. That information gets compiled into a short report with our recommendations and is sent over to you. There's one disclaimer I must share. Even though participating in our site screening program is free and totally voluntary, there's a chance we'll find something worth looking into further. So say you're operating out of a former manufacturing facility. We may recommend you test the indoor air if we have concerns about former chemical use. And the cost of something like that would be your responsibility at this time. But the good news is grant money from organizations like Child Care Aware or First Children's Finance may be available to help pay for these expenses, and we can connect you with these folks if necessary. So this is my big takeaway message, and I think this simple quote says a lot. In this case, the center had been operating a strip mall next door to a dry cleaning business. Chemical vapors from the products used at the dry cleaners were found above levels we consider to be safe in the indoor air of the child care center, meaning these chemical vapors likely migrated through the HVAC system to the child care location. So the children and staff were breathing in this contaminated air for who knows how long. It's our goal with the site screening program to prevent these situations from happening in the first place. And as a business owner or operator, I'm sure you can agree. Nobody ever wants to have to share this kind of news with staff or the parents of the children in your care, which is why we really do feel it's never too late to have your property screened and give yourself the peace of mind that you've done what you can to further ensure the health and safety of the children. We know you're super busy with a million things to do, so I'm going to point out a resource here if you'd rather take the do-it-yourself approach. At a minimum, I'd love for you to take a look at our Choosing a Safe Location for Childcare checklist on our website. See if there's anything that stands out to you about your current location. There's a lot of good info and tips about what to look out for on there. And we also have an informational brochure on our website that explains all that Choose Safe Places offers. I anticipate some of you may want to chat more about this topic, so please send me an email or call me up. I'll also be here for the remainder of the webinar, so if there are general questions about Choose Safe Places, you can pop those into the chat. And that is it for me. Thank you for your attention, and I will send it over to Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Schleep. I work at the Department of Health. I'm the lead and drinking water coordinator. I've also worked with public water systems on testing for lead in public drinking water. So I'm going to start by talking to you about the new statute, which occurred during this most recent legislative session, SF 995, testing for lead in drinking water child care requirements. So starting with that new statute, I'm going to walk you through the different parts of the new statute. The first part is the requirement to test. So this one has by July 1st, 2024, so a little less than a year. Licensed or certified childcare providers must develop a plan to test for the presence of lead in drinking water in their facilities, following the Department of Health's guidance. So there's the guidance document, reducing lead in drinking water. And that guidance document is the same document we use with schools. And it's also the document that we've had as guidance in one version or another since about the 80s. So we've always had that guidance to test for lead in school drinking water and childcare drinking water. And then the other thing that you can base your plan on is the Environmental Protection Agency's 3 T's document, which is the training, testing, and taking action. And those guidance materials also walk you through the process for creating a training your staff, and then creating a plan to test for lead. So who does this section apply to? So this applies to any licensed or certified child care provider, means for the purposes of this legislation, a center that's licensed under Chapter 9503 or a certified license exempt center licensed under Chapter 245H. So part of that plan, the big steps are identifying all the locations within your facility that you would want to test. So if you have looked at our guidance before, we recommend testing all of the fixtures used in your facility that can be used for consuming water. So fixtures that are used for drinking water, like a drinking fountain, or a fixture that's used for food preparation, like a kitchen sink or something like that. And then our plan will also walk you through how to test those fixtures. So we use a protocol with sample bottles that are 250 milliliters. And we also walk you through how to make sure that you're testing in a consistent way. So testing after the water has sat for 6 to 18 hours unused, and then collecting your samples. The next part of the statute tells you about the scope and the frequency of testing. So I already mentioned testing all the fixtures used for consumption, including those used for food preparation. And then we want to test those taps at least once every 5 years. And again, child care providers must begin testing in buildings by July 1st, 2024, and complete testing within 5 years. So what this means is that you would want to at least have started your testing by July 1st, but you don't have to do all of your testing all at once. Every facility can be a little bit different, so you can complete your testing over the course of 5 years. So in larger buildings, they might test some of the fixtures 1 year, some of the fixtures another year. And in smaller buildings, you might test all your fixtures year 1, wait 5 years, and then test again to make sure that lead is staying low in those fixtures. There are some places that we don't recommend testing: hose bibs, tubs, shower heads. And again, these are places people don't usually drink the water, and we wouldn't recommend those locations for drinking either. So subdivision 3 is a subdivision that tells us about what to do if lead is found. So your plan for testing for drinking water must include steps to remediate if lead is present in your drinking water. So the important piece here is that if you have concentrations that exceed 5 parts per billion at a specific location, that's when you must take action to reduce lead exposure, following the guidance in either the MDH document or the EPA 3 T's document. And then you would want to verify that your remediation options that you chose were successful by retesting for lead. So if you're a facility working with our WIN program, and we provide guidance back if your lead results are elevated, we can also provide test kits to help you test to make sure any remediation option that you chose was successful. So some of those remediation actions include using certified filters, implementing or documenting a building-wide flushing program, replacing or removing fixtures, but those aren't the only things that can reduce lead. And you do have the option to choose a method that works for your building and for your staff. Subdivision 4 is on reporting results. So once a child care provider has tested its buildings for lead, they want to make those results available to parents and staff by notifying them that the results are available and doing that no later than 30 days from once you receive your results and annually thereafter. So for example, if you test in July 2024, 30 days after you get your results, you would share those with your parents and staff. And then maybe you're all done testing for 5 years, but you still want to remind parents annually that you have results available from the last time you tested. It doesn't mean you need to test every year, just that you need to make sure people are aware that you have tested and that you've done all that work to keep the water safe. Part B, beginning July 1st, 2024, that's when reporting of test results to the Commissioner of Health or the Department of Health would occur. So once you've tested, you would share your results with MDH on or before July 1st of each year. Again, it doesn't mean you need to test every year, just that you need to share your results with us. Oh, was there a question in chat? Oh, right. Oh, so the question was, I see that the statute only identifies licensed childcare centers or license exempt certified childcare providers needing to comply with these requirements. Am I reading the statute correctly? Yes, you are reading the statute correctly. We would still recommend on the guidance side that all childcares test for lead, but it's not a requirement at this point. So the statute just applies as a requirement to the childcare centers. The next portion that I'm going to take over is talking about consultation. So the current childcare statute doesn't require a consultation, but a similar change to the lead in drinking water statutes for schools requires that the Department of Health consult with schools on how we conduct the results reporting, so that when schools and childcares are doing their results reporting, that it's not overly burdensome, and that we are able to also share the results back in a meaningful way. So we're also reaching out to schools, childcares, and other stakeholders about bringing in the results and how we share them back. So why does reporting results to MDH matter? This allows us to identify where resources are needed for testing and remediation. We already know that we have the WID grant available to help with testing. In terms of remediation, we're working on developing a grant for remediation for lead in drinking water. So results reporting matters to help drive resources to those programs if they're needed. It allows us to make informed decisions about the state of lead in drinking water. The past year, through the work of many people, this statute came out, and changes to the school statute changed the remediation threshold from essentially 20 to 5 parts per billion. And so some of the information we get from schools and childcares helps inform those decisions. And then it's also one easy location for parents, students, and others to find the results and see the work that schools and childcares are doing to reduce lead in drinking water. I'm going to go back to this slide for a second here. So one thing that we'll share in the chat, I think it's a little bit later in the agenda, is our consultation on lead in drinking water result reporting website. So you'll be able to go to that website. You can add comments there, as well as find the previous presentations that were given for the consultation. So the first part of the consultation, we're looking at some of the examples of ways that schools and childcares could report results to the Department of Health. So this is one example using a spreadsheet template. So in this template, for example, if we look at the first line there, we see a kitchen sink that was tested in 2021. And the results there are less than 2 parts per billion. So that was a non-detect sample. If we go a little further down, we can see that kitchen sink 4 was tested, and that was at 12.56 parts per billion. So that would be over the 5 parts per billion threshold. So this is an example of a fixture where some sort of remediation would need to occur. From the results that we see so far, we can see that most of the results in this building were at non-detect and only a few were detectable. So that means they can focus remediation efforts on just those high samples instead of having to look at their whole building. Another example of a way to report results. This is an example that came from California, where they have some schools and childcares do reporting of results and follow-up actions when a result was high. And so in this spreadsheet, we can see that the second sample here was a single water fountain sampled, let's see, in April 2017. And that fixture had a high result and ended up being removed from service. And that was their method of remediating for that fixture. So these are just some examples of ways that we could create a template spreadsheet that facilities could complete and return to MDH so that we can share results, but also be able to aggregate results from all the different facilities in order to make them publicly available. EPA already has some tools that schools and childcares can use to organize and track results. Some of you may already be familiar with these tools. They've been out for quite a while. So one option might be to use this existing tool as a results reporting tool because it's been available for so long. This one's available on EPA's 3T websites. They have the version here is kind of the large version for a school or a large facility, but they also have a simplified version for facilities that have less than 10 sample location sites. And then along with EPA's organizational tools, they also have some different modules there for how to keep records related to your lead testing that might be useful. And it looks like we've got one more question over here. Will MDH or MDE have a template for reporting, or do we need to complete on our own? Great question. So part of what we're doing today is looking at some different templates so we can see if there's something that kind of speaks to you guys in our audience today that might be easiest for you. We know different places have historically recorded their results in different ways. Some of our schools only have historically had paper copies of their results. And so to fill out a spreadsheet for them would take a lot of time. Some of them are looking at, upcoming sampling, what could they do, and maybe using a spreadsheet template. So our intention is to create a template for reporting that you guys would all be able to use, and maybe a template that is designed for larger buildings and one that's a little simpler for smaller buildings as well. All right, this brings us to our first poll question. Caroline mentioned earlier that we were going to try and use some polls to get feedback on especially the results reporting components. So our first poll question is, what would be your preferred format for submitting test results? Such as an online fillable form, a fillable PDF, a spreadsheet, which is more like the examples that we saw from the other states. Or if you have another idea, you could type that into chat as well. And then you'll also have an option to answer these questions through a survey that we'll send at the end. If you're feeling shy about answering questions in the full format, that's okay. So far, spreadsheet's going to win today's webinar. See a couple other options going in there. PDF. And a few people typing in chat too. All right, so the survey will stay, that poll question will stay active, so we'll still get your feedback, so you can still type in chat or answer the survey. Did I skip it? Oh, and apparently I skipped a slide. So our question number 2, what would be your preferred method of submitting test results? So you kind of got your preferred method for tracking them, and then submitting the test results. Would you prefer to log into an online portal to upload your results? Let's see, a few participants in our WIN program are logged in, so that would be kind of similar to how you log into our WIN grant portal. Would you prefer to just do an email to an MDH email address or submit an online form? All right, and then a few people responding that way. Got login, email, submit online. And then the next part. So once MDH has those results, we want to make sure that we are making them accessible in a way that people find useful. So we've have a few different options to share that have been done in different states. These aren't the only options. So we want to think about how would people use the results. So MDH has to make all the results publicly available in one place. So one option might be to do a map. This is an example of one from California. So in their map, they've got little dots that represent facility locations, and then the different colors represent types of, if they've had results over their state threshold. So I selected one of the dots. You can see this one is a school that has at least one of their results over their action level. And you can see it's got the information on where to find the school. Was there an action level exceedance or results over, their state remediation level? And how did they follow up? So this one has a pending follow-up. And then you're also able to actually click on it and get more information for just that location. And you can download the results for that particular site. So that's one potential option. Similarly, Oregon has a map with, again, dots that represent locations where results were received. This one, they had results received or not received, and then you could do a search to find the actual results themselves. Just an example of different ways to share results. This is not lead school testing results. This is a childhood lead map, but it's kind of shows a different way to view results, not necessarily, just kind of thinking about how to view and use results. It doesn't necessarily focus on lead and drinking water results. And then we've also got kind of an example of a different way to report results. This is how water systems report their consumer confidence results. This one, you would type in the name of the water system or the city, and then it would pop up with a list of reports by year. So it could be a list of lead and drinking water results instead of consumer confidence reports. All right, so this brings us to our poll question 3. Is there a preferred method of accessing or viewing results? So it doesn't have to be any of the ones that I showed today. Those are just some examples. But a database, a map, more of a dashboard summary, or if there's another type of way that you think would be useful for either you or the parents and staff that you work with, how they might like to use or view those results. All right. And then again, those poll questions will stay open for our whole presentation. So if you need to think about it, you can before you click the poll. And then for our moving forward, I'm going to switch us back to Caroline to take us through our last few poll questions.
Thank you, Anna. So moving forward, our timeline for this consultation process is that we would like to finish by around October so we can start building and testing that new results reporting process in order for it to be operational by next summer. So MDH, schools, and childcares, we can all meet that July 1st, 2024 deadline. And depending on the level of interest from participants, we might have additional engagement opportunities over the next few months that go more in depth on the topics that we, kind of went over a little bit today: reporting results, accessing or viewing the results, and updating the model plan. We're also working on involving other stakeholders who might be interested in these topics, such as laboratories around the state. We've also had webinar sessions for schools and Head Start programs. So please let us know if you would like to be part of a future session on any of these topics. And similarly, if there is someone you think would be interested in coming to a future meeting, or someone you think might have some, good feedback or opinions on these topics, please invite them or send us their contact information so we can invite them. And you can indicate that interest in the chat or later in the survey. It's kind of the last part of the survey where you can enter your contact info and what you might be interested in. We've included a link to the webpage that Anna mentioned earlier, which is the go-to place for all things about our consultation process for the lead in school and child care drinking water statute. That page includes upcoming webinar sessions that people can join, the PowerPoint slides and recordings from previous webinars, links to the statute and model plan, and an online feedback form that people can submit comments through. We have 2 more poll questions for you. The next one is, what are the best ways to get new information to you? And this is one where you can select all that apply, so you can, make multiple choices here. If you're someone who likes having in-person meetings to get the latest updates, maybe you like having virtual meetings, kind of like what we're doing now. Maybe you just prefer having updates directly to your email inbox, or maybe you want the physical copy of the info and would prefer something be sent in the mail, maybe like a flyer or something similar. Or if you have any other ideas, let us know. You can specify in the chat or in that survey later. We're definitely open to any ideas for, what's the best way to make sure you have the most up-to-date info possible. Looks like email's in the lead for best ways to get new info to you. Thank you. And then our last poll question is, what ways would you like to share feedback with us in the future? This is another one you can select all that apply. If you would, maybe like the sounds of that comment box on the website and leaving us feedback over time as you think of things. Or maybe if you would like to have a follow-up meeting after the results process has been operating for a while. So maybe at the end of next summer or next fall, once we've all tried it out, we can meet back and see how it's going for everyone, or if anything needs to be changed. Perhaps you would like to send feedback to us if we send out a survey. Or of course, you could always send an email to our program email address with any feedback. And then if you have any other ways too that you would prefer, let us know. We'll leave that poll open for a few more seconds as people select their responses. Looks like email is the most popular one for this question too, so that's good to know. And as people are finishing up their selections there, I'll just talk briefly about our contact information. We have our email address listed and our phone number. So this is our program email address, which goes to myself and Anna. If you think of any questions later down the line, you can get a hold of us and let us know. We're happy to help. And then also we have the link to join our lead and drinking water email list. If you're not already on that and that's something you might be interested in, we'll put that link in the chat. And with that, it looks like we have some time now. If there are any remaining questions, you had some great questions as we went along, but if there's any others, you can put those in the chat, or if you raise your hand, we'll be able to unmute you as well. And yeah, if there's any questions for Liz as well about Choose Safe Places, we can answer those. So let us know. I don't see any hands raised, and I don't see anyone typing in the chat. So I'll take that to mean there's not any questions right now. If you think of any later, you know where to find us with this contact information. And lastly, we just wanted to say thank you so much for attending the webinar, and we hope you all have a great rest of your day.